We're
All right.
ready.
Good morning. Good afternoon, anybody, based on your time zone. Appreciate everybody jumping on. We're going to take 35, 40 minutes to get through this and then have some time at the end for questions if anybody needs it. Um, we have a few people joining us today. We'll get through with that. But you are joining a webinar that we're going to discuss integrating automation equipment, automation software, WMS, and ERP. So we will go ahead and get this started. Thank you. So hopefully in this next 35, 40 minutes, you'll understand what we did. We're going from vision to reality with cabi's distribution transformation. They moved from California to Indiana, they automated, and they scaled up their operations in under 12 months. At the end of this, we'll share their real results and real lessons learned. Again, please use the chat icon or the Q&A to submit your questions. The agenda will go through some introductions, why cabi had to do this. Using Alpine, we developed a strategy and network direction. And then again, with Alpine and with Systems in Motion, we worked on a design and integrating automations and systems into the new facility. At the end, we'll go through the execution, the process, the results, and some of the lessons we learned, hopefully to share those with you. In the call today is Greg Abel, the Chief Operating Officer with cabi. He basically handled much of the business and operational vision of the whole project. Myself, Kevin Thompson, I'm with Systems in Motion. I worked with the system design, the integration, and the project execution. And Jerry Spence with Alpine did the strategy, analytics, and network design for us. cabi as an organization was founded in 2001. It's an independent stylist selling model where uh, independent stylists can get their design out to uh, the end user and consumer. It's a highly seasonal and fast-moving inventory, typical we see with other retail industries. Um, this is a note from Greg. It's on the website. I'm just going to read through it so we get a better understanding of who cabi is and what they do. cabi was created through the belief that when we're in relationships with each other, we're better. Whether doing life together, simply helping each other, explore our personal style, or building businesses alongside each other. Simply put, we believe clothes can change lives. cabi offers a sweet spot of connection, confidence, and convenience through best-in-class technology. And you're invited because we believe our true style is discovered when we're all connected. So going into that, I'll leave it off to Jerry, and he'll start walking through the beginning part of the whole process.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kevin. So when Greg and cabi came to Alpine, obviously they had a problem they needed help solving. So in a few bullet points, high level, the problem we were trying to help solve is where should they go? So their lease was expiring in California, so they wanted to take the opportunity to look at, is California still the best location for them in the US, given where their customer base is and where they are shipping. California is also an expensive place to have distribution and warehousing. So with the rising fulfillment costs and labor and in facility, once again, is it the right place to be for the long-term growth and future of the organization? The unique part about cabi's business is the stylists. They have stylists throughout the US. So also the long, slow delivery times to get their product to their stylists, but then also to their customers after they order. People on the West Coast have the benefit of being close to the distribution center, so they might receive product quicker and earlier than stylists or customers on the East Coast. So really looking at balancing that effort and making sure they are servicing their customers within their SLAs. cabi also had a very manual process with their pick, pack, and ship. So looking at how do we improve those processes to streamline and give them scalability when growth happened or they had a spike in orders, to handle that without just throwing manpower out or working a ton of overtime. And most importantly, cabi's presentation within their orders they ship out is a phenomenal, and the accuracy there is great as well. So making sure that the quality and the customer experience that their clients have was not affected with any solution that Alpine and or Sim recommends. Next slide, please. Thank you. So once again, why was it urgent? What was the factor that led to looking in this compelling event, I'll say? The lease was coming up for renewal. Also, at that time, cabi had 2 seasonal launches, so they were trying to time the move and the go live between those launches, not to interrupt operations. And based on that, also the facility had to be up and running, receiving product in October for their first April go live shipments out for their new season, and then zero margin for disruption within the network. So that was another one we wanted to make sure from a customer facing perspective, there was no hiccups or interruptions to delivery and or their experience with the organization. So a couple questions we laid out in the beginning, we really wanted to try to answer. So how can we increase customer satisfaction, either through quicker delivery times, better accuracy, those things, while also lowering costs? Another question we looked at was, where should they be and who should run the building? Cabi ran their current facility in Southern California. So is that the same model that they wanted to run with? Or is a 3PL facility better, with someone else doing that work for them? They can handle the infrastructure and those things. And then most importantly, where does that facility need to be? And then last was, as we touched on before, streamlining those processes through maybe a different type of automation, but most importantly, the automation that fits cabi currently, and then also allows for growth with a actualized ROI within a few years. So where did Alpine start? We started with really a strategic master plan. And what that is, it does 2 things for us. 1, tells us where we need to be. And 2, it helps us understand the processes in the 4 walls of the distribution center to optimize those and get those out. So what we looked at first was the network strategy. So where should they be? So we looked at transportation analysis across 10 plus cities. We also layered in there wages from those cities, and made sure it was a holistic view of where this distribution center should be. Where we landed, a little sneak peek, where we landed was a single centrally located distribution center. And then most importantly is in the Indianapolis optimized cost and service. So those the answers. So we'll kind of get into how we got there with some of the process Alpine took. So we looked at 4 real different options. The first option we looked at is I'll call our do nothing baseline, which was let's stay in Southern California, but let's just streamline the operation, streamline the automation, the picking, the packing, and the outbound, and get the best bang for our buck from an operational perspective, but stay in the current location we are at. Option 2 is we looked at a bunch of different areas within the US to where we were going to put that distribution center as a single distribution center, I'll say. Option 3 is we looked at a combination of those distribution centers because cabi is across the US. Doesn't make sense to have 2 separate distribution centers servicing half of the East and the West. And then option 4, as I hinted at earlier, was really looking at would a 3PL option be better as well. So wanted to make sure we covered all the different options and resources Alpine had access to. So this is just part of the analysis, part of an output. I like showing these because it's kind of cool seeing where you ship your stuff. So this was a 2DC approach, and based on cabi's outbound order volume with all the addresses and zip codes they ship to, we were able to put this really kind of pretty picture together to see where they ship the majority of their product to and where their customer base is. So right now, they're in the lower part of that picture in the green in Southern California, and currently shipping everywhere, east, northwest, all north, south, all over the place. So what this model shows us is if we had 2 separate DCs, who would service what? So if we kept a DC in the west, that would be the green. If we had a DC in the right, that would be the red. And then the blue in the middle is kind of that cost neutral, doesn't matter who ships it, as whoever has the inventory and complete the package and get that out on time would take that blue in the middle. But it's just a nice visualization of where are we sending our product, which leads to where is the best spot to be, right? You can see from this illustration, a lot of dots in the east, less dots in the west, which also, lean towards that distribution center in the Midwest. So after we did all the math, we analyzed the price per square foot, we looked at the wages, we added in transportation from the ports, getting product to the distribution center, all those things. We highlighted all these different areas from the different options. And the one thing I like to highlight it here is I've already mentioned we ended up in Indianapolis. But when you look at the cumulative cash flow, that wasn't actually the best option. It was in Vegas, in Columbus, and Vegas and Chicago had a, sorry, not those, one down. Vegas and Indianapolis had a better cumulative cash flow, a little bit more, not a whole lot, but a little bit. But after conversation with Greg and the operations team and Sim, and really looking at what else would need to happen to make a 2DC approach feasible, is additional headcount maybe at the corporate office. So now you're managing two sets of inventory. You're having to receive inventory on the west, split certain percentages off, send them to the east. Every so often, you'd have to balance that inventory. You'd have two separate leadership structures. So there's a lot of internal things as well that you need with a 2DC operation. So really talking through those led us just to that 1DC model, which kept us in Indy. Even though numbers wise, it was second best, but from a conservative approach in streamlining the supply chain for cabi, it was the decision we moved forward with. So now, since we know where we're going, now we need to understand what we're putting in the inside to store and to pick products. So what we call at Alpine is a storage type analysis, or STA. Okay, next slide. We look at your inbound volume, your outbound volume, your SKU profile, your order profile. We take all the information we can, and we then calculate in state, what do we need to properly have pick faces and then a proper reserve storage. So this first is really around the main pick line. We believe a lot in Pareto's law. 80% of your lines is around 20% of your SKUs. And cabi's order profile fit that to a T. So their A movers, 80% of their lines is 28% of their SKUs, but what's really cool is also 80% of the quantity. So it really is nice that they have that high distribution, which drives our weeks or days on hand in the forward pick. So we break down all the SKUs based on their outbound volume and then put them into those categories, A's, B's, and C's, and D's. And that's what drives, what do I need in my forward pick? So taking this chart and then moving to the next slide, you can see how that breaks down into actually, what do I physically need? So now, since I have all my SKUs, they're categorized. I know the size of the cardboard they come in, the cartons. I then can now size the best carton flow or hand stack or whatever technology or racking system I want to put them in to make sure I have the weeks on hand to reduce my replenishments. So that information led directly into these main pick line results. You can see all the different options, and this is the results. So the optimization software we use actually looks at thousands of different sizes, and then we slowly kill and combine those down to a manageable amount of different rack profiles. And this is where we ended up with the different main pick line results. So we ended up with 7 different forward picks. So now the main pick line is designed, now we need to know what our reserve storage looks like. Because cabi has their seasons and their releases, what we liked about it is we were able to actually introduce real dense 2-deep storage, right? A lot of product come in, we're able to put 2 pallets back to back and not have those aisle spaces. And so we see some 2-deep pallet, we see some hand stack because that corrugate we receive in, those cartons are small enough where they don't justify a full pallet position. So we're able to have some hand stack, and also a ton of single select for the product that doesn't necessarily get the volume we need for the 2-deep. So we look at all that. We add it all up. We include some auxiliary places for paperwork, for packaging materials, for other things we just need to store in a distribution center. And then we add in our honeycombing, 85% utilization. We ended at about 4,600 unique locations for reserve. So now we know where we're going. We know what the forward pick needs to look like, and we know what the reserve storage needs to look like. So now it's time to optimize. Now it's time to look at how do we improve processes. And the way we did that is we had an automation evaluation. So where we were going is a 125,000 square foot facility. We needed to be operational under 12 months, and the inventory needed to be live in October. So those were what we really were kind of looking at as our criteria. Those were the pictures from the current facility, the old facility they were in. And Kevin, next slide. What we looked at really is how do we change, if we're able to change, a discrete order picking that we're doing in Southern California, multiple touches per order, and I'll explain that in a second, and then the heavy reliance on temp labor. So you can see from these pictures, Cabi used kind of a carousel system to pick in. So each one of those black totes you see on the right-hand side was a unique discrete order. And they would pick that through the carousel through their main pick line. And then on the pack stations on the far left, they would deconstruct and sort those discrete orders for that show host into individual customer orders, and then slowly go through their pack out process. So as Kevin and I and Sim and Alpine looked at that and partnered with Greg and his operations team, how could we take that kind of manual, lots of touches, and streamline that the best way possible, where we're not affecting customer satisfaction, that customer experience, our SLAs, and all those things. So based on all those conversations, this was the first initial conceptual design Alpine presented to Sim and to Cabi. Very basic. You have your reserve storage up here in 6, the 2 deep storage in 1, or not in 1, right below that. Your inbound on the left, your outbound on the right. So it's a nice flow through building. The accessorial areas along the bottom here. And then the main pick line in 5, and out the door pack and ship in 7. So a nice flow through, nice U-shaped pick. But based on this, it was our initial design. So now it was time for feedback. How would this actually work? And based through the conversations, it went through multiple iterations. And the conversations we were having is, how can we change those future processes? How can we look at a different type of automation? So we had that baseline. What was the data telling us? What's Cabi's WMS capable of handling? Are they able to incorporate an execution system? Are they not? What could we actually implement and do within the timeline we had? So all the things we looked at was slotting location, size optimization. Perfect. We're going to put the right product in the right locations. We looked at optimizing the throughput. We looked at batch picking, right? Being seasonal, you tend to pick a lot of the same SKUs all at once. So should we batch pick or continue to discrete order pick? Can we institute a pick to light? We looked at high-end automation as well. But really what we were looking for is a clear separation between the pick, the sort, the pack, and then the pack out operations. And Kevin, I'll pass it back to you to get into kind of how Alpine's conceptual baseline design, and kind of when you took and got your hands on it, where you took it to.
Thanks, Jerry. So in California, they used a gravity trolley system with their pick and pass. And we tried to, what if we used that same technology and did pick and pass with discrete order, or separating out the trolley out, adding in the dividers for the sub orders. We also looked at a pick packs, batch pick process with a put wall, which you kind of see on the right-hand side. This unit over here is actually an OPEX sure sort. It's an automated put wall. We looked at that as an option as well, versus where you could just do random batch picking, not discrete order picking. In the end, we did go with a manual batch pick to cart type scenario with a put wall, a PTL, put to light put wall with 20 zones. Each zone had, I believe, 25 or 24 different locations. You can see them in the middle section here. Each one of these areas is one zone, and there's 10 on each side. It's a rather large put wall. They bring in the totes by SKU, log into that one zone, and the operator would be directed to put away. One thing we identified is that their internal WMS system did not have the capacity to implement all this without adding in a WES. The stability of their software was one of the things we were concerned about. We did take a quick look for future automation, adding in an automated put position. It was around $1 to $3 million more in additional funding, and we decided not to go with that in this initial layout. If Cabi expands into the future and gets a lot larger and wants to redo it, the design we implemented will be capable of putting that system in. So like what Jerry gave us in the first drawing, those 7 positions, we wanted to make sure those same 7 things were identified in the new layout. So this one, a little bit different in how everything is located. We've established the walk paths and the fork truck paths. Fork trucks would go down the middle, the walk paths are on the upper and the lower. So we would separate the operators from the fork trucks doing the replenishment. Down here is where the two long put walls were that you see in the position. On the outside is where they pick from the light and build out the discrete orders. These 4 stations on the top were set up for various processes that cabi runs through the course of the year. Not every process runs discretely through the same one. They may have something in a back order scenario where they're short of one color, one size. So they order a couple of pallets of that. They can just simply drop that pallet off these outside positions and quickly process those through to the outbound orders. We implemented a auto case taper. So as the product is delivered into the taper, we seal that up. It is labeled at the pack station and it goes right out to one of these 2 dock doors for floor loading. So we did identify with this WMS system that they had, or the Clio, it was not going to support all of this. So we brought in a COS software. We were able to integrate that with their Clio WMS as well as the Oracle ERP communications. I'm not going to go deep into this graphic. It's just showing a lot of the process steps that we had to identify that the COS system was going to take over and start handling. Again, during the development of the software integration on this side, the equipment side was pretty straightforward. The software side, as we went into there, understanding the limitations that Clio had and what their ERP was able to support, we had to make sure we tracked every single task through multiple meetings. And this is just one of the process flow charts showing the different types of orders that go through the cabi process. So again, I kind of mentioned it before. I'll go through it again. The process we brought up to them was a batch picking. So they would take one tote out and pick for that wave of orders, all of that SKU into one box and present that box off. The COS system has multiple different screens allowing operators and supervisors to acknowledge where all the orders are. They use these screens to release the actual waves. They'll push waves out or pull waves back based on what's needed. COS does the work for identifying replenishment. If we run out of an product in the middle of a SKU, in the middle of a wave, we'll know that and push a replen during the wave or before we release that wave, identify that location and give all those directions off to the operators. So the original system didn't have wave management. This new one brought it in. The previous process didn't allow for the replenishment on a continuous basis. They may run out in the middle of a wave and have to go back and replenish without them being aware, or they'll pick it short, put it into a QA area and wait for that final item to get found and put into it. The previous system was also manually waved. They really didn't have a lot of control about how they would develop their wave based on the limitations within the software system. So COS now, again, tracks the inventory in forward and the pickable areas. We do not track the inventory in the replenish area that was maintained in the Oracle ERP system. We do generate the replenishment tickets based on what we see in the queue for waves coming up. We identify waves by ready to pick and by shipment and delivery status. You obviously want to push the ones that require a 3 or 4 day ship time out before you do the ones that are the 1 to 2 day ship time so that the customer's SLA is achieved. COS directed the put away and directed pick by bin location. We integrated with the scanners to track the inventory live during the picking process. In any picking operation, you may have a error in the data, which shows you have 25 items and it's only 24. We'll get that feedback directly from the operators and make adjustments going forward. So again, the software integration, it takes a lot of work to get those put in to make sure that all the different tasks, all the different one-off, you find a product on the floor, you have to pick it up, understand how to put that back and how the system knows exactly where that was allocated to, cycle counts, all those things. We went through a number of workshops and seminars to make sure that we've got everything covered. This bottom one is an issues list. As we go through and identify issues, we track them, and it's like an issues log. So 3 weeks later, we may make a decision, not sure why we did that. We can go back and look at the log and understand why those decisions were brought in. It was a significant amount of change brought into this facility, going from California to Indianapolis. Almost none of the existing workforce went with the move. Um, we had to develop a training process. We had to create a fast onboarding and make it a more consistent headcount for the operations going forward. Some of the risks we ran in during the execution phase, there's mechanical and electrical build that has to go on. A lot of wiring, a lot of data management has to be taken care of, and that all had to be organized. The parallel process validation, one of the interesting things here is because of the move, because of how they had to quickly get out of the facility by the end of February, I believe it was, and be live, the automation and the software system wasn't live at that point. So we ran a manual pick process and then implemented this automated pick process, and we ran those parallel for a little while. And then when we turned on the different portions of the software was something we had to watch. So what were the results? Here's where I normally hand it off to Greg. He's the voice of the customer. He ran these real results, and let him explain what he saw.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So we, had a number of things we were trying to address, both in terms of facility workflow and then in the customer experience for where the market was located. So on the facility side first, we wanted to ease pack station responsibility and allocate that better across all flows on the floor. So with that, we wanted to put more pressure, let's say, on the pick line, but we also wanted to do it with faster velocity instead of just transferring that labor and time. So we saw a 50% increase in the velocity of our peak line, or of our pick line. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a prompt on my phone. And that, paired with stability at the pack station, allowed our time to prep and get the product ready for carrier to happen faster. Then the market assessment, moving from a West Coast location to a centralized spot, saved us 35% drove a 35% reduction in transit times, cutting nearly 2 days in average transit for our consumer, which was a huge win for our stylist base who are running their businesses. The additional benefit that we saw from a labor side was we are a company with very large variance between peak and non-peak. We always had large influxes of temp staffing who would need to come in to help us, which drove inconsistent fulfillment quality. But the changes we've made on the floor have allowed us to reduce kind of the staffing spikes we need at peak time. So we have less dependency on temp labor and a higher consistency and accuracy for the product we deliver to our end consumer. And Victoria Kickham was able to cover these successes in her January 26 DC velocity profile on the brand, which gives a lot more context to everything Jerry and Kevin have covered, as well as the KPIs we noted in the previous slide. So as we kind of break down, what worked, what we do differently in terms of really the key things, we had thorough data assessment from the start. And I think it's important to emphasize it happened both on the Alpine side and on the cabi side internally. I think the groups did a good job of kind of sanity checking each other's work to keep us pushing forward. It was also really critical. What I'm pleased we did with in hindsight is we were very open to the solution. We didn't bring in Kevin and Jerry and say, hey, we have this trolley process. We have a ton of work done at the pack station. We want to replicate all of that. The only really mandate that we had was the need to preserve the show order experience that Kevin spoke to earlier, because that's critical for our business. But beyond that, we were open to the type of solutions we could have. So we weren't fixating on specific equipment or other things that were going to shoehorn us into something. And so that let us cover a wide range of options and get to something that was far more productive going forward. And then in terms of opportunities to improve, or things that we'd recommend to anybody considering a similar move, we knew we were leaving California, which created great risk and great sensitivity that we wanted to be mindful of to our employees at our Carson facility. So we treated the searches very clandestine. Alpine and Systems in Motion only had access to 4 cabi employees for probably the first 9 months of the project, which slowed understanding and progression. There are better ways on my side that we could have been more creative in getting them increased access and exposure without tipping off that we were almost guaranteed to be closing the facility and leaving the state. So I definitely encourage everyone to, you're always going to want to kind of protect the news or protect the secret. But you want to make sure that your partners can see as much as fast as possible to really help spur the most productive, solutions. But, Jerry and Kevin and their teams did a great job overcoming our kind of protective state there. We had a very long tenured team in California. Our average tenure was over 13 years, which is really wonderful and really rare, but that came with a very intuitive process. So we had very old documentation that was poorly updated, which was very hard for new stakeholders to gain knowledge transfer. So I do think it's really essential that as you kind of explore kicking off a project like this, that you don't just kind of assess that you have your data in a good place, but also have your workflow documentation in an updated place as well. We also, due to the super tight window, left very little time for user testing prior to go live. This wasn't unexpected, but certainly if you can avoid it, I think all sides would agree that the more time to spend in testing, the better, just to work through the kinks. We were doing some of this live after the facility was already open, and we did it with minimal interruption, but it certainly comes with its own stress. And then buffer time for change management. We had no facility overlap. We stopped shipping out of California on Friday and started shipping out of Indiana on Monday. So again, we've noted kind of throughout the conversation, our challenge that we were bringing from the beginning was a very tight timeline. We knew this was inevitable. If you have the ability to spend 18 months conducting your search instead of 12, I'd encourage it. If you have the ability to have facility overlap of even 3 to 6 months, I'd encourage it. But that creates its own stresses in ways too. But all these things are, I'd say with that one, it's not something we could have avoided, but it certainly was. It required everybody to iterate very quickly. And all things considered, we all did that well. So then in terms of final takeaways, I think for us, it's really clear that the client, Alpine and Systems in Motion both brought great expertise and solutions, but it's really critical for the client to articulate their need clearly and comprehensively. You have to give the product clear intention. Some of this is through project kickoff, but a lot of it is through the internal documentation and the data, which I spoke to previously. You need to run data sanity checks. You need to know how you're situated to help optimize the market. Alpine can run a great assessment on their own, but without sanity checking, there can always be kind of things that might turn into square peg round holes. So you have to view it as a partnership instead of something that you can lean on them in isolation. And Jerry, let me know as I'm saying that if it's something where it's like, that's not meant to call out Alpine at all. It's more of just like what the partner should do with any third party. So if that sounds critical, then I'll figure out how to reword it. And then, as much as the process can be really great, you have to have great leads on the floor. You have to hire a great GM. I'd say that the skills needed to stand up a building are very different than inheriting and refining a strong pre-existing process. We had great partners that I'm standing up here with today, but we also hit a home run with our GM hire, and that made the entire process, especially on a fast timeline, still work out in a way that we were feeling, wins very quickly instead of taking a long time to get to that spot.
So, Greg, I think the only other one thing you kind of touched on that I'd like to add is I think during our conversations, the trust was there, the level of respect was there to have very open and honest communication that was to the point, right? As you said, we had to iterate quickly a lot of times. Everything, every question came with positive intent. I'm kind of going down this because there was a question of, what would I tell others that they need to do to prepare for something like this? And my knee jerk answer to that question is thick skin, right? We didn't have a lot of time to deliberate, to go back and forth. Like we had to come together, figure out what the problem was, quickly solution, and then move forward. And sometimes those conversations weren't pleasant, right? But they needed to be have done. And we all knew we were coming from the right place, right? You held your team, yourself, and us, and everyone very accountable, and it was awesome. And we held you the same way. And I think that just fostered the ability for us to have that very transparent conversation where we needed to make answers. And I never felt like anything was ever pushed to the side. We always were able to speak very quickly, honestly, and openly and solve those to move things forward to hit the timeline. So that's one thing I just wanted to add to that,
Yep.
to the question that was asked. And the other thing is data, right? Making sure that you have your data lined up, it's accurate. We've touched on it multiple times, because if your data is not right, the solution is not going to be right. Old saying, not the best anymore, but garbage in, garbage out. So if I was going to, tell someone what to prepare for, it's make sure your house is clean. You have your data set up. You have your subject matter experts who are knowledgeable in why you do things and the history there available for those conversations, and then prepare for quick, fast decisions. We knew it wasn't going to be perfect the first hour. And Greg, I remember the conversation where I think you said it's going to be clunky, but we're okay with clunky as long as it works, right? We moved so fast, it wasn't going to be necessarily absolutely perfect, but it was going to get the job done. And then we can tune and improve over the days, the hours, the weeks, the months to get it where we needed to be. So I think that's the other thing is it's not going to be absolutely perfect. It's going to work. It's going to go well. But there's always follow-on actions that come out of a go live like this, where it's like, oh, we can't believe we all forgot about this, or that's not working the way we intended. Let's make some changes. So those are the three things that I would say to prepare yourself for.
Jerry, any other questions or comments inside the chat and Q&A we need to address?
Nope, that was it. That was the one. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. Well, there's no other questions. I believe this recording will be available, and I appreciate everybody's time jumping on. Jerry, Greg, thank you very much for all the time put into this. And if there's nothing else, we'll let everyone have the rest of the hour back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.